Hitler's U-boats tried to starve Britain. America answered with ships built faster than they could be sunk. In the darkest days of World War II, a shadow war raged across the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. Hitler's U-boats, the infamous wolf packs, were tightening a deadly noose around Great Britain, determined to starve the island nation into submission. For every Allied ship that made it to port, 2 were being sent to the icy depths. Britain was on the brink of collapse. America, not yet officially in the war but committed to aiding its allies, knew something had to be done. The answer wasn't just to fight back. It was to outbuild the destruction. This is the story of how America answered the crisis with a fleet of humble, unglamorous ships, built faster than the enemy could sink them. This is the story of the Liberty ship. The situation in late 1940 and early 1941 was desperate. Britain, standing alone against the Axis powers in Europe, was an island fortress entirely dependent on imports for food, fuel, and the raw materials of war. The Battle of the Atlantic was not just a naval conflict, it was a battle for survival. German U-boats were sinking merchant vessels at a catastrophic rate. The British were losing 500,000 tons of shipping a month, a pace that was simply unsustainable. Winston Churchill himself would later admit that the U-boat peril was the only thing that truly frightened him during the war. He pleaded with the United States for help, not just with warships, but with the cargo haulers that were the nation's lifeline. In response, President Franklin D. Roosevelt promised to turn America into the arsenal of democracy. But building traditional ships was a slow, meticulous process, taking months or even a year per vessel. They needed a solution, and they needed it yesterday. The answer came in the form of a British design, simplified and adapted for American mass production. It was initially derided by some as a dreadful-looking object, and Roosevelt himself dubbed it an ugly duckling. But this ugly duckling was designed for one purpose: to be built in staggering numbers, at breathtaking speed. This was the birth of the Liberty ship. The genius of the Liberty ship lay in its simplicity. These were not elegant, powerful vessels. They were basic functional freighters with a single 2,500 horsepower steam engine that could push them along at a plodding 11 knots, slower than a surfaced U-boat. But their design was revolutionary in its pragmatism. Instead of the traditional time-consuming method of riveting hulls plate by plate, Liberty ships were built using prefabricated welded sections. It was a modular design, like a giant floating assembly kit. Massive sections, the double bottom, the forepeak, the deckhouse, were constructed simultaneously in workshops across the shipyard. Then giant cranes would lift these modules, some weighing over 250 tons, and weld them into place on the slipway. This was not shipbuilding as it had been known for centuries. This was manufacturing on a colossal scale. To build these ships, America needed new shipyards, and it built them, seemingly overnight. On coasts from California to Maine, vast industrial landscapes rose from mudflats and undeveloped waterfronts. Names like Kaiser, Bechtel, and Todd became synonymous with this unprecedented industrial effort. These weren't just shipyards, they were entire cities, employing hundreds of thousands of men and women who worked around the clock in 3 shifts. Many of these workers had never even seen an ocean before, let alone built a ship. They were farmers, shopkeepers, and housewives, all drawn to the call of duty and the promise of a steady paycheck. Under the visionary leadership of industrialists like Henry J. Kaiser, who applied his experience from building the Hoover Dam to shipbuilding, these yards became crucibles of innovation and efficiency. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Initially, a Liberty ship took about 230 days to complete. But as the yards perfected their assembly line techniques, that time plummeted. Soon they were launching a ship every month, then every week. The competition between shipyards became fierce, a race against time, and a contest of patriotic pride. In November 1942, the Kaiser shipyard in Richmond, California, set a record that still beggars belief. They assembled the SS Robert E. Peary from keel laying to launch in just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes. A few days later, fully fitted out, it put to sea. America wasn't just building ships. It was launching a factory onto the waves every single day. Over 2,700 Liberty ships were built in total, the largest class of ships ever constructed. But these ships were nothing without the crews who sailed them. The men of the U.S. Merchant Marine were civilians, yet they faced dangers as great as any soldier on the front lines. They were a diverse lot: old salts, teenagers looking for adventure, and men unfit for regular military service. They signed on to sail these slow, lightly armed vessels into the most dangerous waters on Earth. They had no military escort of their own, relying entirely on the protection of the Navy's convoy system. Their cargo was the lifeblood of the Allied war effort: tanks for North Africa, ammunition for the Pacific, and food for the beleaguered people of Britain and Russia. Sailing in a convoy was a nerve-wracking ordeal. Dozens of merchant ships would steam in a tight grid, flanked by a handful of destroyers and corvettes. The constant threat of a torpedo strike hung over every voyage. At night, running without lights to avoid detection, the danger of collision was as real as the danger from U-boats. The Murmansk run to the Soviet Union was particularly brutal, a gauntlet of ice, storms, and relentless attacks from German planes and submarines based in Norway. The men called it the suicide run. 1 in 20 merchant mariners who served would not survive the war, a casualty rate higher than that of any branch of the U.S. Armed Forces, except for the Marines. And yet, they sailed. The Liberty ships, though slow and vulnerable, were also remarkably tough. Tales of their resilience became legendary. The SS Stephen Hopkins, armed with just one 4-inch gun and a few machine guns, found itself in a duel with a heavily armed German commerce raider, the Steyr. In a heroic, lopsided battle, the crew of the Hopkins fought until their ship was a burning wreck, but not before they landed critical hits that ultimately sank the German raider. Both ships went down, but the Hopkins sacrifice was a testament to the fighting spirit of its merchant crew. Another Liberty ship, the SS Anne Bradstreet, was torpedoed in the Barents Sea. Her back was broken, her engine room flooded. By all rights, she should have sunk, but her welded hull held together. The crew managed to keep her afloat for days in the freezing Arctic waters until she could be towed to port, her precious cargo still intact. These floating factories were the logistical backbone of every major Allied operation. They carried the men and material for the invasions of North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. And on D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history, a vast armada of Liberty ships stood off the coast of Normandy. They formed part of the artificial Mulberry harbors, some being deliberately scuttled to create breakwaters, while others ferried an endless stream of supplies, jeeps, fuel, ammunition, and food that sustained the armies pushing inland. Without the constant, reliable flow of materiel delivered by these ships, the liberation of Europe would not have been possible. After the war, the Liberty ships continued to serve, transporting aid to rebuild shattered nations and carrying cargo around the globe for years. Many were sold to private shipping companies, becoming the tramp steamers of the post-war world. Today, only a handful remain, preserved as floating museums, quiet, steel monuments to an extraordinary chapter in history. They are the SS John W. Brown in Baltimore and the SS Jeremiah O'Brien in San Francisco. Visiting them, you can walk the steel decks, see the simple crew quarters, and stand in the cavernous cargo holds where the fate of the free world was once carried. The Liberty ship was never celebrated for its beauty or its speed. It was a tool, a workhorse, an ugly duckling born of desperation. But in its creation, America unleashed its industrial might in a way the world had never seen. These ships, and the men and women who built and sailed them, represent the quiet, unyielding determination of the arsenal of democracy. They are a powerful symbol of how, in a time of existential crisis, ordinary people can achieve the extraordinary, building victory one ship at a time. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the past. Your support helps us continue to bring these incredible tales to light. Until next time.